I think people aren't going to be happy with me about this, but I was the technical lead for the account sharing crackdown at Netflix, and that's been pretty successful. The one thing that I guess I'll add on to that is I fought a lot on the side of the customers, a lot in internal discussions, but yeah, it was a very interesting project.
Welcome to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand with Nicholas Kuhner. Welcome back, everyone. And tonight we have Jose Moreno, the founder and CEO of Neulight. Now, those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a while know that I lecture in digital marketing in Norway and focus particularly on vocational teaching. So we do hands-on work. And a lot of the education that we do is online. And how does one tie in online education with real-world results and make sure that students actually are able to use the insights and really learn using all of these fancy new channels we've got, and especially with the advent of AI? How is this impacting on how we learn? How do you make sure that students just don't go down their own rabbit holes and don't follow a framework? So we're going to chat to Jose about that. And just a bit of background. Jose is a son of Salvadorian immigrants who fled civil war and has risen to be a tech innovator at giants like Microsoft and Netflix, and is now building at the intersection of technology and education. So Jose, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about it.
So I see you've got a Netflix poster behind you. Won't you just give us a little bit of your background? Because it's always nice knowing who we're chatting to in terms of what has brought you to this particular point. So I don't want your whole life journey. I just want to talk about the last couple of years in terms of how your roles have led you to this particular place. Absolutely.
To start off, I went to Harvey Med College, graduated in 2009. That's probably a little bit more than the last couple of years. I'm getting a little older now. After college, I went to work at Microsoft for 5.5 years. I was really lucky in that I got to work on really large scale systems that were managing online systems for 500 million customers. And they were doing it in with the new architecture style at that time. So I got to learn a lot about large scale and optimization during my time at Microsoft. And then in 2015, I decided to join Netflix. It was an exciting time to join Netflix because they weren't fully global at that point. And so I joined them to help them go global. And I spent the last 9-ish years there. In the last couple of years, I think people aren't going to be happy with me about this, but I was the technical lead for the account sharing crackdown at Netflix. And that's been pretty successful. The one thing that I guess I'll add on to that is I fought a lot on the side of the customers, a lot in internal discussions. But yeah, it was a very interesting project. I think it was about 3 years, the last 3 years of my time there. And after successfully deploying that, started looking to what's next.
These companies that you've worked at, you've mentioned quite big numbers. So with Microsoft, 500 million, and Netflix, who knows how many customers they've got sharing or not sharing passwords. Moving into your own platform, which is Neulight, where you don't have 100 million customers just yet. Talk to me about the stage that you are in at now. Is this startup phase? What type of customers do you have on board? What are the ideal customers? And what is the scope or the potential reach of Neulight?
Yeah, so we launched our MVP this summer, and we've onboarded a few schools in a couple different districts, and we're actually in a couple states now. So I started focusing on this in January full time, and it's now September, so I'm pretty proud of the progress that we've been able to make within Neulight within that time. It's pretty exciting. When people see our demo, they get really excited, and so far we have a pretty high conversion rate there. There's a different challenge of getting people to the demo stage, right? Which is, I think, a little bit more marketing and sales, which isn't my background, but it's something that I'm very excited to dive into moving forward. It's very different, but it's also interesting because one of the first customers that we were talking to, they were a district with 20,000 plus students. And as we were having that conversation, they were saying that they were interested in using IntelTier, which is our product. And they were like, oh, but can you handle 20,000 students? I know you're a new company. And I was like, don't worry about that. Like, we can handle 100 million students tomorrow. That architectural design that I have in my background has already prepared our products to be really like ready for large scale. It's extremely reliable. All of the things that I think Netflix really takes a lot of pride in, which is just making sure that it works every time that you want to use it. It's extremely important, and it's one of our biggest principles within the company for sure.
So we've spoken a bit about your background. We've spoken about some of the technical aspects of Neulight, but we haven't actually said what Neulight is. So why don't you give us the elevator pitch that you are starting out with when you're trying to get folks to your demo site?
Yeah, our flagship product is called IntelTier, and it's focused on helping educators implement the MTSS framework. That's the multi-tiered systems of support framework. This is a framework that's been around for about 20 years or so, and it's focused on academic and behavior interventions. The real difference between what historically has been done in the United States schools and what this framework is pushing for is that it's data-driven, and it tries to be really proactive with the support that it provides students. The problem is that the framework itself is kind of theoretical in nature, and schools, a lot of times, there's a lot of moving parts, right? You have different groups, personas within the school system that are all focused on supporting students, but may not always be aligned. And so the two big value propositions that we're providing is we're providing an online platform that allows for the record keeping of student behavior and academics, and move that online so that all of these different people that are focused on supporting students can collaborate asynchronously, as opposed to right now, sometimes people remember to take notes on pen and paper, and then when they actually want to talk to a counselor or about student support for that student, then hopefully they bring in the notes. And then at that time, the person that's a little bit more familiar with the MTSS framework has to review everything, try to like really figure out, and then like remember about like what the framework suggests in that case, and then come up with an intervention strategy and then execute on it. And then they may not meet for another 6 weeks to see how things are going. So by streamlining that entire process, we're already providing a significant amount of value. The second value proposition is that the framework itself, like I mentioned, is extremely theoretical. It's really focused on taking a whole child view and getting an understanding of what's happening with the student and what may have changed to try to figure out like what the underlying issue is and try to provide interventions to help the student out and get back into like a better path. The problem is that teachers in the US are very overworked. There's very minimal amount of time for training. And so the understanding of the MTSS framework is very low. There was a recent study, I think within the last year, that said that more than 50% of teachers do not understand the MTSS framework. And so we are providing a value on top of our platform that has an understanding of the MTSS framework that gets all of the data to be a data-driven solution of like what's going on with the student, the context of the school, putting all of that together, and then providing guidance on student interventions that should be the most effective for those students at that point in time. You're right, like right now we're just getting started. We don't have millions of users, but it is a data-driven framework. So I'm really excited for the future when we scale and we really start to see which interventions are most effective in which situations, and our system can only get better from there.
As a teacher, we love new technology and we love having to learn new platforms and having more work to do and learning new things.
Exactly.
How are you dealing with that? I can see, and this is one of the problems I'm having with my interviews, I ask too many questions in a row. So my first one is, teachers love having new things to learn because it means more work, more overtime, less time with the kids, etc. So let's start with that. How are you making this easy for adoption for folks who just don't have time, as you said?
Yeah. The last thing that we want to do is give teachers something new to do on top of all their other responsibilities that they already have, right? And like I mentioned, they're overworked. So our focus is more around simplifying the things that they already do, make it streamlined, so that they can get back and focus on what they actually care about, which is teaching students, right? And so we made our platform as easy as possible for you to input data. Teachers can just get in, record the data, and then get out and get back to focusing on students. Arguably, that could become much easier than grabbing a piece of paper, grabbing a pen, writing it down, storing it somewhere, and making sure you have this organization system, and then you can bring that into the student support meetings at some point in the future. So moving everything online, moving everything asynchronous so that they can have conversations back and forth without having to schedule meetings that might be weeks ahead of time should all really speed up that entire process. The act of taking notes of what these events are that students are doing, that's happening. So we're not asking them to do something new. We're just changing the format in which they do it. And in true Netflix form, we're making that as simple as possible so that they can just get in and get out.
Now, in Europe, you have something called the GDPR, which I'm sure you're quite familiar with.
Yeah.
When it comes to the security of students' information, because this is obviously quite sensitive.
Yeah.
One child, you don't want anybody to have access to this. How have you worked in security when it comes to making sure that this information is secure, not shared with anyone, and potentially if that student changes districts or states, is that information portable?
Yeah. So migration is not something that we've gone into yet. So I don't have a solution there. It should be portable, though. A lot of things are stored against the student ID. But in the US, we have FERPA, FERPA, that specifies regulations on how to manage student data. The student data that we're talking about here is a lot more sensitive than I think grades, right? Because health factors can play into this. And so we are also trying to be HIPAA reliant, not trying to be. We are FERPA and HIPAA reliant. The way that we approach it is we have end-to-end encryption. We have encryption at rest. We have multiple servers that are each responsible for their own set responsibilities. We have to train our staff to understand what these regulations are. And we have role-based access set up in order to ensure that the only people that get access to student data are the ones that need it in order to make sure that the system runs well. And so putting all of that together, and we're using Microsoft Azure. So a system or a cloud system that's already set up to be able to handle high security solutions is a much better option than us trying to run our own servers and setting everything up from top to bottom ourselves. So we're relying a lot on Azure to help us out with it as well.
Awesome. We've touched on, again, some technical things and some questions that I think teachers or leaders would be interested in. But let's talk about some of the functions. So what I'm really excited about is the integration of AI into this, because this almost sounds like it could be replicated in a medical situation where like a tele doctor, for example. So you've got a sore wrist, you've got a sore elbow, etc. You need to take these medications. This is based on your history. This is what you need to do. Is that the similar kind of principle where you can look at best practice and it will suggest best practice without you having to rack your brain? And especially as a new teacher who's coming into the job and doesn't have 20 years experience dealing with children with difficulties or with specific circumstances, is this what your AI is aiming to do?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes. And the entire concept and the reason why I have been separating IntelTier from Neulight is because we're not quite sure where Neulight's going to go in the future. But this type of solution that we're building, it can expand out to other areas as well, which makes this entire initiative really exciting. For now, we're focusing on the education sector, definitely in the near term, and then maybe down the road we could talk about other fields. But ultimately, what you need to provide the AI is the context, right? Either you train it or you provide the vector databases that it can retrieve that information from. And then you give it just overall context about the entity that you're analyzing at that moment. And then putting that all together, the AI can spit out recommendations.
Now we're talking about AI, and everyone knows about ChatGPT and perhaps Claude and a couple of these other platforms. But those are kind of open source. Your LLMs or large language models, are these being run on your own servers? Are these using APIs, for example, for external models, or is this something homegrown?
Going back to
and the reason I ask this is because from a access and from a privacy perspective, you obviously don't want this information circulating easily around everyone's ChatGPT prompts.
You nailed it. So exactly what I was going to say was going back to the privacy issue. We can't send out sensitive student data outside of our servers. So we do host our own LLM model, and then we use embeddings. We use a lot of Azure for this, but we have our own models. We have our own vector databases. Everything stays within our servers within Azure to ensure that, we're not sending student data around to random servers out there, and they're not getting trained. Like, that data is not being used for training future models. That would be dangerous.
Yeah. So let's talk about rollout for this, because you've mentioned you're in a couple of districts and a couple of states. What is your vision for your platform?
Right now, the most important thing for us is making sure that we're providing our users with value and that they're happy with our product. And so far, no bugs raised, no concerns. And so I'm happy. Tracking metrics on our side to make sure that there is usage, right? And so that's the focus right now, making sure that we're providing value. And in the near term, we want to expand out and start getting more and more schools onboarded onto this. The MTSS framework is a data-driven framework, but it's mostly been built off of small studies here and there. State over here will do like a study, or some districts over here will do another study. And they're taking a lot of judgment calls to say, these are the ways that you should approach things, kind of moving forward. I think bringing in some of that tech mentality into education can be quite exciting. There's potentially an opportunity here to build a large scale data system that really then we could train a model to really figure out what the most effective intervention strategies are in different situations. And so that's pretty interesting to us and something we will likely look into in the future.
So we've spoken about the educational aspect, the safety aspect, all of your exciting LLM activities as well. Let's talk about the actual running of a business or running of a startup. So you've worked at big companies which have lots of staff, lots of experience. You're now doing this. You just said earlier that you focusing on this full-time now. Tell me about that transition of not being full-time and deciding to make the move to full-time, because that is the big turning point when it comes to any startup and any founder's life, is going, I've just got to make this work.
I will say this. I think I'm privileged in the fact that I've had some good investments and worked at some good companies over my career that has allowed me to have a little bit of a cushion to focus on this full time and not be overly concerned about where the next paycheck is going to come from. Not that I'm not concerned, but it's not my main problem right now, which is great. I've always been kind of a jack of all trades and jump into different areas and basically do what needs to be done in order to make sure that projects are successful. So from that standpoint, I'm very lucky that I've had that type of personality, and it's perfect for a startup because you really have to jump into everything. Like, one moment you're coding, the next moment you have to do admin things, then you have to set up a contract, then you have to actually market and get out there and try to meet additional potential customers, maybe go to some conferences, which we've done, and meet some VCs to continue to have those conversations. So you're basically splitting your time everywhere. It's tough. It's not easy, especially for somebody that has a lot of context switch. I need some time to ramp up and start focusing on the thing that I'm working on. But it's fun. I think the biggest challenge that I've run into so far is that even though we have a ton of positive signs that this thing can be quite successful, every once in a while there's just this doubt that sneaks in for no reason. Not like there can be no external event, just randomly one Friday evening, all of a sudden it's like, oh, is this going to work? And you just kind of start freaking out. And I think it is ultimately, it's a lot of just unknown. You don't know what the next 6 months are going to look like, what the next 2 years are going to look like. And so you have to be passionate and persistent, and you just have to like truly believe that it can be successful, because if you don't, nobody else is going to. So it's almost like there's a new term that I learned recently, and I really love it because I think it does describe me. It's irrational optimism. Like, I truly believe this thing is going to be crazy successful. Do I have enough data right now to make that claim? No, I can't say that I do, but I have no reason to not believe it.
I can tell you that irrational optimism is what drives all the great entrepreneurs. So I'm very glad you've come across that term and that it strikes a chord with you, because you're going to have ups and real big downs as well. And only that optimism, that irrational optimism of thinking, this is going to work. Screw all of you guys. I don't care what you say, the naysayers, it's going to happen. And I mean, all entrepreneurs have that, and they have that nagging feeling behind, at the back of their head. But having that optimism is what you need, and you've got to maintain that throughout this entire process. Otherwise, nothing will get done.
Exactly.
And, in this early stage, you are the main driver. You're the nuclear engine behind this. If you stop, the whole ship stops. So great that you've figured that out, and that's exactly what you need. So you've got to try and maintain that. I just had a fantastic chat with somebody called Amber Furman, and she is a coach and talks about, she's got a great new book out as well, which you can listen to on that podcast. But she talks about having these, and it's not irrational fears, they're rational fears, and they've emanated somewhere. You've had a bad experience before, or you've got some nagging self-doubt, and there's a lot of reframing that's got to go on in your brain as an entrepreneur, and as you're going through this process. And coaching can help that, networks can help that, having folks that you can talk to about it, because everyone who started a business has exactly the same frustrations and experiences and feelings as you. So make sure you don't bottle it inside, talk about it, and I promise you other people will open about it and will share their experiences and help you along this path as well. That's the exciting thing about being an entrepreneur. There are lots of us out there.
I think what I've found that's really helped me is not so much focusing on the progress over the last week or last month, but instead focusing on doing something every single day to move the company forward. Just a little thing here and there. If you're having a great day to focus, get in there. If you're having a really off day, just try to send out an email and be okay with yourself. Say, today's not the day, tomorrow will be better, and just kind of move forward. You're not really going to see the progress from here to yesterday, even the week before. But now when I look back at what we've accomplished in the last 8 months, it's tremendous. I can't believe it. So don't overly focus on whether or not the needle is moving. Just continue to push, have that perseverance, that determination, and then look back at it in 6 months and see what you've done.
Well, as I say to a lot of my startup friends, you'll be an overnight success in 10 years. So enjoy
that's
the
something
journey.
else that's helped. I've looked at like other successful companies and how long it took for them to get to revenue, to get to like market product fit, right? And it took years, 10 years for a lot of other companies as well. And so it's a 5 to 10 year process. Like, that's the mentality you have to go into it with.
Yeah. And a big part of that, and I was doing a class, which I love doing today, which is on brand strategy. And we were just looking at logos on brands, and people immediately stick a logo and they think people are smart enough to know what company it is, so they drop the name, like the Pepsis and all of these companies. And it's about consistency and constant exposure, and just consistency is the key word that I can use. So I love that you're very focused on one aspect of the educational journey, and you should probably stick at that and make sure that whichever name you're going to be using for the product or your business, that is what is just repeated over and over and over. No matter how bored you get of hearing the name or seeing the color or seeing the logo, just keep repeating, and that's what's going to get into people's minds. So in terms of your marketing process, I'm sure you've got some smart marketing folks with you, but that repetition and just being consistent, selling your Big Mac basically is going to be super important. So the last thing I want to chat to you about is who are the people that I need to get to hear this discussion. So who is the right person to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of interesting product that we've built first, and so it's been a learning experience. But the right people are anywhere from teachers who are focused on providing support for MTSS. Even if teachers aren't focused on it, but they're recording student emotional and behavioral data, then this product can help. But I think so far the best contacts for us have been more the counselors, the BCBAs, assistant principals, and superintendents. And so it ends up actually being like the entire chain, but the decision makers are generally at the top of the chain, right?
Yeah, so you need to get some good marketing folks who know Marketing 101,
It
building
needs to be
those
a little
groups
bit more
online.
Yeah.
And that's what takes time, but the building of groups and forums and Reddit and things like that are probably spaces you should be having a look at. Jose, where can I send folks to get more information about you and your product?
Yes, please visit our website on neulight.io. There's a contact us form if there are any questions, but you can also view a video that we created for IntelTier and sign up for our pilot program that we're currently running right now to work with schools to make sure that we're building the right product. And then, we'll talk about pricing and sales a little bit more next year.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to spell that out quickly so that people who are typing it out, neulight.io. We are going to put the link in the description, so if you want to get it, it'll be sitting there. And Jose, fantastic. I think it's super important both for students and for helping teachers really get the best results for their students, so they really deeply care for. I know most teachers do. So this is very, very valuable work you're doing, and I hope it just goes from strength to strength.
I really do appreciate your comments. So why not go and watch this live on YouTube, or go to my website, kuhne.no. That's kuhne.no for more information.